How you doing?
First of all, being paired up with the Clemson regional, talk about that. And number two, success has been hard to come by on the road this season. Is the dynamic a little different now, not facing just one team, but three teams?
Yeah, it's certainly a different dynamic. It's a four-team tournament. It's very similar to this year had a different quirk to it. We played at Grand Canyon. We played at three different sites. But I believe our first year here was Pensacola, or I guess it was our second year. Some of those tournaments we've gone to in Round Rock, it's four teams, it's one site, and it's a fun environment. Everyone's trying to be the best team. So our job is just to kind of manage the things that we can and try and be the best team in each of those categories, whether it be as small as, just your time in the cage being valuable, or body language, handling adversity, whatever you want to bring up. And then with this team in particular, and you talking about being on the road, I think there's some confidence in the back pocket of our guys that they've been at three of the most tradition-based SEC programs in the history of the conference on the road, seen what that looks like, experienced it, some good, some bad, and then ultimately kind of put the pieces of the puzzle to win a road series against South Carolina, who's hosting their own regional. So again, I think there's confidence through the adversity part of it, of having to just go through it, but then also parallel to our teams evolving and slightly, improving day in and day out. They improved to the point where they were able to win, again, not just on the road, but against one of the best teams in the country.
Ben, Ryan, and then Eric. Tony, you talked to Hoover about how time off can be a good thing if you get put out early in Hoover. I guess in hindsight now, reflecting after a week and a half off, just you feel even more strongly about that? What do you feel like your guys are after having some time off?
Yeah, we'll look back on this year, regardless of how things go moving forward, and a big theme will be illnesses or sickness. And I don't know what it is. I know other people have experienced it, but I think we've experienced it to the max. It started in the fall and has not stopped. And, Cal Stark came back yesterday for the first day after a couple days of being sick. And if we would have stayed in Hoover for a maximum amount of days, there would have been several days where guys were not available. And so it allowed for those guys to recover and maybe avoided other guys from getting sick, if that makes sense. They've been allowed to call it rest their immune system. I'm certainly not Dr. Klink, but also just rest in general. And you see guys bouncing around with a little bit more energy. And then for us, as we strategize with our bullpen and also just kind of getting the pitching thing sorted, I think some guys, had been pushed pretty good, and we're starting to feel a little bit sore. So those guys almost get to reset the way the season will reset. I don't know how they do it on the scoreboard, but I believe the batting averages will be 0. It's a new opening day. Like I said, it's a 4-team tournament. It's a part of the season, and yet it's separate. And so one thing that we'll be able to do is almost kind of have that physical and mental feeling like it's opening day because of that gap between our last game and the first game against Charlotte.
Ryan, have y'all decided what y'all are going to do starting pitching-wise Friday night?
No, and that would just be based off, we haven't completed today's practice schedule, which would involve some bullpens and things like that. I don't think we plan to reinvent the wheel or anything. We started to really kind of have a feel for what roles our guys were going to have. The rain delay against Kentucky created a situation we had patiently waited for all year long with Halverson. And then again, rain has followed us everywhere. At South Carolina meant that it made no sense to try and push Lindsey. The tournament starts on Tuesday. A lot of those guys throw Thursday and then Tuesday, and it made no sense to do that with Lindsey. So Halverson got a start out of the deal. So whether it be he or Xander, we know we got a couple extra guys in our back pocket, and then about everybody on our team has relieved, at some point in time with this program.
And with Lindsey coming from Charlotte, is there any advantage or disadvantage for him there with kind of that familiarity if you were to face him?
There's been some time between there, similar with, Austin Knight, who everybody here was a fan of. Guys have swapped programs due to the portal and junior college stuff like that. But there's been some time, not just, between tenures, but also the start of this year and the end of this year. That just kind of shows you how much one team or one individual can change. So there's maybe a little bit something there, but I think when play ball is said across the country on Friday for all these games, these kids grow up and They probably shouldn't be worried about Omaha when you're playing in a regional, because that's a few weekends away. But you know how that's what everyone's going to get wrapped up in, and everyone's going to have the most energy in the dugout in the first inning. And again, that's every team. And they're going to be wrapped up in how do we win. So storylines can be fun. I don't know that there's that many in our regional, but they kind of go to the wayside, I think, for coaches and players once the game starts.
Eric, Casey, and then Vince.
Tony, on starting pitching, obviously you have your 3 guys who have been going, but you have a couple other ones who can come in and give you 5 innings, spot start, whatever. You have a lot of options. Do you build your roster, recruiting, transfer portal, all that type of stuff for this time of the year to have all those options kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with a guy the other day on the phone, and he used the word stable, and it's kind of nice to feel like you got a lot of thoroughbreds in the stable. I think we've kind of been, kind of multi-purpose in recruiting. We've maybe hit on some guys that were guys everybody in the league wanted. Then there's also been some guys that Coach E and Coach Anderson just had a good eye for. And then I mentioned the name Coach Anderson. He, Q, and Woody work with the pitchers way more than I'm ever around those guys at all. And that's a pretty good triumvirate, if I can use, I think it's a Roman word or Latin or something like that. But that's a pretty good trio right there. So you're going to end up producing some guys that either were already good, they get better, or some guys that maybe were under the radar and they improve as well. So it makes for a good group each year. But you do want to have a vision like you've got depth. If something happens or somebody changes a role, you got a guy are prepared right there. And, we've seen it in the Fall World Series here the last couple of years when it's just our team. You got 2 guys going head-to-head pretty good on, one of those occasions. And then we play another game and you got 2 guys that you could say, I could trust this guy starting an SEC game and this guy. So pitching depth is a strength for us going into the regional for sure.
At South Carolina and since in practice, what have you seen from Chase Dolander that's really led to his increase in his game and in his productivity?
Yeah, I would be curious what his answer has been to you all on that. I'm sure you asked him, but just freed up, whether you call it being handcuffed by certain either mental thoughts or maybe there's some physical things there too. There have been a couple weeks where he doesn't feel 100% health-wise due to illness, but just freeing himself from things that probably are a weight on the shoulders. We use that as a cliche for a reason, but it literally can be like you're carrying a backpack with a couple plates in it. And so you walk around campus as a student, if you got a 10-pound weight in the back of your backpack, you're not going to want to walk very far. You can handle it for a little bit. And so I use that as a analogy for how I've seen Doe just through my own eyes. And you see him getting more and more free mentally and physically, and it means a little bit more upbeat tempo, a little bit more upbeat and better presence or body language, and ultimately it means better stuff too. And the criteria for judging an outing can be different than everybody, but again, save from the outing where he was sick, I've kind of seen this out of him, which is the way you want your team and your players to go.
Tony, he actually credited a mental conditioning coach for helping him with the expectations and handling adversity, tough outings and things like that. Can you kind of expand on using that in your program to help your guys? Yeah,
I mean, I just spoke with somebody on the phone, and you're recruiting, so I don't ever want to sound like a used car salesman, but you gotta pitch or put forward what you think are the strengths of your place. And because we're at a university like this, we have a football stadium where there's over 100,000 people. I don't know if you guys have to, but most of the people have to pay to get inside there. Do you guys have to pay? Okay, good. We got to pay for a new baseball stadium, so we might have to change some things around here. But, the nature of our fan base allows, and the quality of the university, and of course now Danny's kind of an expert at fundraising and moving forward with facilities. We got everything you could ever want with technology. We don't like to cram it down everybody's throat. Nutritionists, you talk about the mental game. It could be mentality away from the field too. It's all available for our guys, but it's like a buffet. If I go to an Italian buffet, I'm trying everything. But maybe for whatever reason, my dad only wants to try, spaghetti and meatballs. So you don't have to use it all. But if you got self-awareness and you're in an area where you're struggling, maybe to put on weight, you got to use a nutritionist. And I think it says a lot about Doe as an individual to admit to that. Because step one is recognizing it. And then the next step takes a lot more courage. and it's asking for help. There's no one that's been an athlete before that's any good that doesn't have pride. And when you got pride, sometimes that can block, things, that could maybe be a benefit to you from you kind of expanding yourself. And feeling vulnerable is something that, again, no athlete or coach wants to do. But again, I think if you've got the self-recognition that you're not what you need to be in an area, and you step outside of yourself and go seek out help, that is huge. And that's as good of an example as you can set. And it ends up, making you a better person and a better player.
Take a few more. We'll go Ben, Ryan, and Eric. And we'll have Casey in the back.
What is your philosophy when it comes to pitching plans in the postseason? Are you somebody that likes to leave the rotation as is and not toy with it, or do you try to avoid looking ahead to if we win, we'll throw this guy, if we lose, we'll throw this guy? Do you try to avoid the tinkering?
Well, I think pride is a word I just brought up. Coach Anderson's got more pride than anybody can imagine in every single inning or every single pitch. It's meticulous. I don't know how he does it, being executed and being as good as it can be. So I drive him crazy sometimes when we maybe think outside of the box or do different things to involve guys or keep guys developing or, try and keep guys fresh. His goal is to win every single pitch, and with my duties, I handle it a little bit differently during the season. But as you get going, kind of how we've done over the last few weeks, you start to narrow your focus really just to how can we, present the best opportunity for us to win. And I think the best opportunity to win the game that's in front of you is the thing to do. And then you got to scramble, win or lose any postseason game. At Hoover it's different this year, but last year, win or lose, and you come up with a new plan that's specific just to that next game. I think to get too far ahead can cause problems in the game that's right in front of you. And again, that's kind of our goal, is just win the game that's right in front of you. And you want a group of guys that are down there that constantly have in the back of their mind, like, if you need me to handle this, I can. Coach McCann, is just our video coordinator, I say jokingly. He's about as good of a pitching coach across the country as you can imagine. It's fun to watch him and Frank work together. And he tells a story on a Tuesday, his Friday night guy, they just keep going extra innings. And when he was at Northwestern State, the guy just went and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You need me to end this game?" And he ran down there, put on his spikes, and came in and ended the game. It's that time of year.
You mentioned Austin Knight a minute ago, but I was curious where you've seen him grow the most in the 3 years since he's left this program.
Well, when we went over there a couple years ago, during a midweek, he made some plays at third base, but he did that here. I mean, he was capable of being a good defender anywhere on the infield. We used him at first base and then came in naturally as a shortstop, second. So he was right in that mix of Trey and Jarrell, his buddy Max Ferguson, that could really kind of play anywhere. So it's not like he hasn't improved in those areas, but he always had that capability of playing anywhere on the field. And it had pinch run for us a couple times, so athletic enough to be a good base runner. And then hitting, everybody evolves each year. You tinker a little bit with stance and things like that, but he's an aggressive hitter. He's a guy who wants to hit. And, we've seen that, in his time here. And then again, that one occasion we drove over there and played on a Tuesday. And then since, you start to break down video or there's stuff available, I'm sure those guys have checked out. That aggression stays there. So for him and everyone else, it's really just about getting older and getting more mature. And that's kind of what our game has become. I don't want to say old man's game because we're talking 22, 23-year-olds, but shortened draft, COVID, transfer portal, it certainly has made it to where you maybe don't have to be older in age, but you better have a level of maturity to you, and you better be as physical as a guy like Luke Lipsius that is an old man now. Old, retired, and married. Probably making money, too.
We'll go Eric and Casey and then finish with Ray. I'll go with Casey and finish with Ray.
Knoxville native Cam Fisher is the home run leader for Charlotte. Do you guys have any plans for shutting him down or approaching his game?
Yeah, not to this point, other than, I know where he trained. I think, again, you talk about maturity. It can kind of come in a bunch of different ways. And physically, I know where he trains. And with Crazy Charlie, he's been with him at times and has transformed his body into one that is capable of doing the things you're talking about. So he needs to be on Father's Day thankful because he's got good genes and a good mindset from his dad, who from day one when we got hired, if I'm not mistaken, he was already committed before we got hired to the first university that he attended. But ever since then, his dad has been helpful to us in the community. He's been fun to talk to at the park within the rules. And he's a good baseball mind. So, you know, I joke about Father's Day because he got good genes and a good mindset from his dad. So good family, and it's good to see him having a good year. And it goes without saying you prefer him to not have too good of a year against us.
Great.
Tony, did you get to see Ben Joyce last night?
I did. I was very upset I did not get to see it in person. It kind of worked out cool where he was in the Midwest because Zach asked to travel and the family scrambles to California, which is great for them. I didn't want us to go out there as a staff and not see him pitch. We put all this homework into it, and it was pretty much set in stone. He was going to throw yesterday or last night. But with us finding out where we go and all this planning, it would have been too much of a scramble. But his brother was on the group me sending messages to the guys, and he was juiced. And watching that ball move around, it was pretty evident that the big man was juiced too. And, you know, to kind of come in and then it not go well for a second or you know, get a base runner and then kind of do what he did speaks volumes about how he just keeps maturing and how good the stuff is. And it was pretty cool listening to the announcers because they were very complimentary, as they should. Hard work. Anyone, you know, you see it with our program in a bunch of different ways, but don't judge a book by its cover. You never know someone's backstory, and anyone who follows him outside of this community might jump to the conclusion, well, he's big and strong and he, you know, it's easy for him. He's 100% created I almost say the thing, which is more of a compliment. The thing that he's become has come with work ethic. And I've said it before, but I can't stress it enough. I mentioned it to the guys. He has created the individual that he's become, and I don't see him slowing down because I know that the work is not going to slow down.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, everybody.